So, I was just saying about the people who I missed, because they're here. And my comments about law are these. As a youthful revolutionary, we were inspired by the civil rights and black power struggles here in North America, which threw our freedom movement into the prisons. And George Jackson was assassinated a couple weeks after Nixon severed the dollar from gold. This is back in 1971. And with his murder, the Third World Study Group at Attica helped to lead the prison takeover of September 1971, when L.D. Barkley of Rochester, New York, where McKella, my partner, and I met and fell in love. L.D. Barkley spoke of the Attica brothers and demanded the abolition of prisons and the transport of the prisoners to a non-imperialist country. Which at the time did not seem quite within the realm of possibility. I take your laughter as friendly. Nelson Rockefeller killed L.D. Barkley, our homeboy, as well as 44 others. And our collective has been rich in experiences against the lawlessness of the ruling class in our scholarship, in our legal work, in our prison work, and in our work for human liberation. Now, when the London George spoke to us about sedimented knowledge brought into the future. So I'm going back to a point of sedimentation. But for me, I thought of, well, if that's happening to us, it's happened to others before us. And how did they deal? And before them. So that's... When the London proletariat delivered Newgate Prison of hundreds of prisoners in June 1780, a great angry carnival of direct action led by African American former slaves, one of the witnesses recounted they proceeded to Newgate and gave them 5 minutes of law. We have admired and chronicled direct action, and often our spirit has been antinomian, a theological term that I've often hid behind or with, emphasizing salvation by grace rather than law. And Midnight Notes would emerge anonymously in contrast to the personality-driven academicism of critical legal studies, the Union of Radical Political Economists, Radical History Review, all of which emerged at about the same time. I won't go further into that. Now, so that's about law. I wanted to say one or two things about history from below. I have some reservations about this phrase, which apply to a similar phrase, history from the bottom up. And the reservation stems entirely from the underlying image. It's a metaphor of elevation, isn't it? A metaphor of height. And and in that respect, I think it's a feudal, it's from the Middle Ages, when the ruling class rode horses, which were high up, and made it, and consequently changed the terms of struggle. History from the ground, I think, is a better idea, evoking as it does farming, gardening, as well as being it's on a firmer and grounded basis, and it's fundamental. The revival of labor history, the acceptance of African American history, the discovery of women's history, why should these be below? Our daughter, Riley, just is going to college and just wrote a paper on Nietzsche, which I read before coming down here. It's very good. And to take one of her lines from Nietzsche, "Behold, there is no above, no below. You are light. Sing." Anyway, I'm not a Nietzsche scholar, but there's a bit of Nietzsche. It seemed to fit into New York. But even there, the above and below, there is an above, isn't there? And that's where we come in. We try to understand the dynamic. Do I have another minute?
Yeah, you got a couple of them.
Okay. I was going to offer a word or two about Marxism, about how the wage is an irrational expression of class relations. That's what Karl Marx used to say was his principal contribution he made, along with the distinction between concrete and abstract labor, as well as the division of surplus value into interest, rent, and profit. And this irrationality of the wage form, for me anyway, has remained very fundamental for understanding. Coming out of 1971, we had both the organization of Native Americans in the American Indian movement, and we had the organization of wages for housework in Italy and in London as I knew it. And that put an emphasis on this wage and wagelessness, and I began to relate this to Karl Marx and the notion of the production of a surplus and why that whole wage is so irrational. And it was our task to explain that irrationality and to see it as the basis of divisions within a class that could be made. Anyway, well, for me it was good because it helped also to understand in North America the historical division between the enslaved and this absurd phrase that historians developed, absurd phrase called free labor, which is has been very pernicious in my understanding, in my profession, because I'm a professional historian on the job market.